So every day we're inundated with Facebook posts, tweets, social media about war, poverty, social injustice, climate change, global warming. And we're also given joyous, beautiful distractions. We're given happy zoo animals, we're given baby kittens, we're given baby sloths, we're giving strangers proposing to each other in funny ways. And the happy links are more popular, aren't they? And I'm not judging that. I like the happy stuff too, but ignoring the bad things is not what makes it go away. And we build for ourselves these bubbles of baby sloths and kittens, and it allows us to not think about the reality, but the reality is there. You can't ignore something as big as global warming, because it does not just affect the Arctic regions that I've been obsessed with since childhood. It affects your backyard, and that's scary. So just this past summer, I went up to sail around the Arctic archipelago of Svalbard on a 3-masted barquentine on an artists and scientists residency, because I wanted to see the things that I was hiding from. And so I had this idea that I was going to be this enormously romantic figure, Rockwell Kent in Greenland, George O'Keeffe in the Great American Desert, and I was going to stand on the edge of the glacier and I was going to say, I will save all of you. And that was it. I was going to be alone. I was going to be truly alone. And it was going to be wonderful, and I was going to make art about that, and it was going to be moving. Well, the boat was 120 feet long, and it came with a complement of scientists and poets and artists and sculptors and essayists and novelists and a playwright and a ukulele player and an intelligent polar bear warning dog named Nemo, whose primary and unrealized goal was to someday catch and eat a representative of the Svalbard species of reindeer. And then there was crew, chef, sailors, polar bear guides, and I was never alone. We were continually in each other's pockets, we were arguing, we were drinking, we were laughing. You could not take a step off of the ship without 3 triangulated guards with rifles, because there were polar bears who are apex predators and we are small and pink and delicious. It wasn't the trip that I wanted. It wasn't the trip that I thought I wanted, but it was the trip that I got. And I went and I experienced it, and I used that trip to make art. Now, making art is something that anyone can do, and we get really caught up in the idea that making art is something that, it's defined in the 2nd grade, and either you are an artist or you aren't an artist. You are talented or you're not talented. But art is a human activity, and all human activities improve with practice, right? So do you remember the first time that you sat behind the wheel of a car or a bicycle, or you crossed the street by yourself, or you learned to play a musical instrument, or say 2 words in a foreign language to a native speaker, and you realized that they would not understand what you said? That's really scary. Compared to that, art is not so scary. So I went on this trip, and I did my very best, and I'm very stubborn. I did my very best to enjoy it for what it was, and it was 24 hours of daylight. And I'd never had 24 hours of daylight before. There are some people for whom, when there is no night, your circadian rhythms kick in or crap out. And mine crap out, and I didn't sleep. And the sun moved around my head like a crown. And I fell in love with the sky. And I fell in love with everybody on that trip. And I realized, okay, this is a new thing. And one morning, it was technically morning, the sun was always up. We went up and we went around the north part where the flake of the Arctic ice comes down. And so the sky was the same color as the sea, and it was all the same color of gray, and you would see these little bits of white ice go past. And it was dead quiet, and there was fog everywhere, and I felt very, very, very small on the prow of the ship. And suddenly, there were 2 brown dots. And so they steered the ship carefully and quietly, and those 2 brown dots resolved themselves into a mother and a baby walrus. And the baby was the size of a Volkswagen, which is living proof that all babies are cute, right? And he kept popping up his head to look at us, and she kept pushing his head down. He kept popping up his head. They had no idea what we were. And I looked at them, and I realized that these were, how many times have I looked up baby walruses on YouTube? A lot. But they were there. And they were as small as I was in a world that was changing, that was being changed by my species. And they didn't know what was happening, and that I needed to come back and change. I needed to change my work. I needed to change my art. And I wouldn't have gotten that if I had stayed and I had hid in what was safe and comfortable. So I needed to go home, be alone in my studio, and make art. And then my art would save the world. Which is usually a laugh line, and I appreciate that it isn't here. But art can save the world. It genuinely can. And that isn't some big, open, speaky talk, right? Like, art makes things better. Well, art genuinely makes things better. Dorothea Lange, who was one of the photographers in the Farm Security Administration, went out and with her camera documented migrant workers and sharecroppers in the Japanese-American internment camps, the shameful secret of American history. And her pictures have stood the test of time in art history and in social history, right? We look at her pictures and we're moved by them. But while she was working, she took her most famous photograph, which was of Florence Owens, and it's called Migrant Worker. It was taken in 1936, and it's a woman with her children, and she's looking off to the side. Within days of that being published, the United States government shipped 20,000 pounds of food to the migrant camp where this woman was last seen. She took the fear, she made art, it saved the world. At least a small part of it. And that's what we can do. This past winter, I went back to Svalbard to continue my research and continue the narrative, and I finally got my aloneness. I stayed alone in a little room in a mining camp, and I walked down past the mountains every day in Longyearbyen, and up from the mountains rose ghostly imitations of those mountains, the Northern Lights. And through the Northern Lights, I could see Ursa Major. And it was the only bear or other kind of wildlife I'd see on that whole trip. Because the real ones were all denned up with their babies waiting for the light to come back. 24 hours of darkness is very different than 24 hours of daylight. But I still didn't sleep. I was alone. Like, I was really alone. I ate alone. I slept alone. I walked alone. I was in the darkness. When it's 24 hours of darkness, there is no snowmelt. Everything that falls from the sky rounds itself off. The snow never packs, and it blows through the air like little particles of glass in your face. And I was really alone, and I was really afraid. And I used that. I used that fear to make art. This is something that human beings do. Picture making is a big part because art functions as a sort of visceral empathy. It says, this is what I see with my eyes, this is what I produce with my hands, and I show it to you. I give it to you. And that can be scary, but that's something that we can use. So if art is something that you want to make, get up, get off your couch, close your laptop, sharpen your craft, go out into the world, experience, come back, and make art. Because art can help the hopeless, even the seemingly hopeless cause of an artist who has reflexively learned to shut out the world.